Mouse Trouble News fans, I have a weird one to share with you. One that I really don't think is true. Apparently, a lot of alternative media sources, ones being highly conspiracy-oriented, says that there's a station of Chinese troops in Mexico near the border and several port cities that are preparing to invade the United States, and they are here right now. Now, these sources, like I said, they're from conspiracy places and one trucker who claims to have seen all of this, so take it with a very large grain of salt. Now, the trucker says that he actually delivered to the base where the Chinese troops are stationed in Mexico. He said he was delivering a truck load full of food to a location that was 60 miles south of Laredo, Texas. And he says once he got across the border into Mexico, he was escorted by Mexican federal police, so that, he said, to avoid theft or sabotage or anything like that. The truck driver spoke to several media outlets, one of them Q Radio, a conspiracy one. He said that he actually drove up to the base where the supposed Chinese troops actually were. Now, he said the base was about 2 miles wide and about 3 miles long, which is a pretty standard for a military base. And he says he saw 10,000 armored vehicles. Now, that's his guess that he saw 10,000. Frankly, that's a lot to actually guess from just looking. And it's different from looking at crowds from the sky and guessing how many people there are. But to say 10,000 vehicles are, well, it's a pretty strange claim to make, and one that's very, very hard to back up. However, he did give a good description of what the vehicles actually look like. That odd green characteristic of red Chinese vehicles. Well, that's not really a whole hell of a lot to go by. Pretty much all militaries in the world use the same shade of green for their vehicles. A olive drab or a matte green that doesn't shine. Some of them have infrared reflective paint. Some differences, but pretty much they all use almost the same shade of green. Now, I know somewhat of modern Chinese military technology, and I'm not aware of there being a special shade of green that they use that nobody else uses. They use a camouflage pattern that other countries don't use, but as for a shade of green that's characteristic to them, no, I've no idea what he's talking about here, and it's just pretty strange. Now, that's the same radio show that he was speaking on. The host there says he heard there was high-frequency communications that come on the same frequency that the U.S. military actually uses. This is what he actually said about that. Heavily Oriental accented operators speaking broken English in direct communications with communists, the continental United States military comm stations. The accent was not Japanese either, but Chinese. It's a very dubious source. In fact, I would bet it probably was Japanese. There's a lot of military cooperation between the United States and Japan, so it's very likely it actually was Japanese. But again, this is a very dubious source, and it's a pretty wild claim. But if I had access to U.S. military high-frequency communications, then I would check it out for myself, but oh well. Now, I'm really hesitant to take this trucker's word that he saw Chinese troops. Now, we remember Sharon Angle, the Republican senatorial candidate that was standing around the Mexican kids and said, "Some of you look Asian to me." Now, in the southern states, that's fairly common, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he was actually seeing Mexican troops at a Mexican base, and maybe some of them were lighter skinned than other Mexicans and thought they were Asian, and if they were Asian, he thought they were Chinese. And this is a pretty wild story to just throw out there, or to make that kind of a claim on a radio station. But given southern, attitudes being what they are, they very likely could have actually just been Mexicans. But I do remember a claim like this that I heard on Coast to Coast AM way back, maybe 2002. This guy said there was 300,000 Chinese troops hiding in northern Canada preparing to invade, and that there were also 600,000 Chinese troops in Mexico waiting to invade. And I thought that was absolutely insane. The supply chain necessary for 300,000 troops is literally impossible to cover up. You would not be able to keep that secret. You could not hide the supply chain for 300,000 troops from anything. People living in the area, they would notice how many bloody trucks were coming through. People in the area would see how many bloody airplanes and helicopters were coming through. You can't say radar wouldn't pick that up. I mean, the U.S. has access to Canadian airspace through radar. They can see it. I mean, it's just insane. And then to double that number in Mexico, such two strong allies of the U.S., Mexico and Canada, it's just absolutely insane. I think a trucker saw something, misinterpreted it, and turned it into some gigantic, fantastic, fear-mongering story. Because that does happen quite a lot in the U.S. and other countries as well, but the U.S. is pretty well known for it. So, honestly, my personal opinion, because I have already gotten like 2 messages asking me what I think it's absolutely false. I don't think it's true. In fact, I think it's effing hilarious if there really were Chinese troops in Mexico preparing to invade.